Salut everyone! In this video I want to share with you my findings towards the behavior of a 9070 XT while gaming. And I found out some really interesting stuff and I want to share them with you before you get one. Because this information is gonna, I believe, impact your choice. Are you ready? Let's get into it. As always, let's start with a little bit of context. The card was released 4 days ago and I got it day one. About a gigabyte 9070 XT OC at MSRP price. The card is the most simplistic you would find out there. It has nothing fancy. We'll get into it after, but it's just a basic card. It doesn't have a crazy big cooler. It doesn't have all the the fancy stuff, but it actually performed insanely well, and this is really what I want to talk about, because this GPU doesn't behave like all the other GPU I owned before, and I owned a lot of them. So if I had to compare this card with, for example, my previous card, like the NVIDIA RTX 4090, it kind of behave more like a CPU rather than the GPU. Let me explain. So let's start with my little stuff here, the 9070 XT. The first thing I want to talk about is the frequency. Okay, so when it comes to frequency on paper, I believe the gaming frequency is going to be around 2970 megahertz. Okay, this is, I believe, the one from AMD. And this is the theoretical frequency that the 9070 XT should be limited at. But in real case scenario, what I notice is that the frequency will go way higher than that. And on my card, I was able to get, without OC, without able to do anything, just launching an application which is going to be using the card, like a game or any type of applications we're going to use the GPU, I was able to get around 3366 megahertz. So it will just auto-clock itself like the actual CPU, right? You don't have this limit written in a hard block, right? It's just going up by itself. So this is the first thing. The second thing you need to take in consideration is the temperature. Okay, so when you look at the temperature of the card, I was around, I would say 60 to 65 degrees Celsius while using the card. And I was never able, I would say never able to reach, which is super important, 70 degrees. I was never able to get there, which is pretty impressive. So when you look at those characteristics, you understand where I'm going now. The card being pretty cold, around 60, 65 degrees around here, you're gonna get a really high frequency, and you won't have the frequency going down much further because the card doesn't get warm. And if you look at the real case scenario I've been experiencing, I will be around 3100 megahertz to 3250 megahertz while playing games. Okay, which is pretty insane compared to the base AMD recommendation. It's almost 10% increase on a model of card which was MSRP. Now let's talk about the other part I looked at. It's the wattage. So here the base model is supposed to be at 304 watts. My card, by default, is at 330 watts. This is the base AMD. This is my card. And this is the maximum possible on the card. The maximum you could go, it's 340 watts. So you see here, you won't have a lot of room to increase the wattage when it comes to pure performance. But I think it's important to notice it is that you don't have a lot of margin when it comes to increasing the power of the card itself. So now, why is it that important for you guys to have this information before getting the card? Well, it is important because when you look at the 9070 XT product, you have a pricing that will go from MSRP, even if it's not the MSRP is going to be a little bit different, but my guess is you're gonna have the best price for card like mine to the MSRP, which are like plus like what, like $300 or even like plus like $200. A pretty big bump in terms of pricing compared to the basic model. And the real question is like, is it worth it? Is it worth it from a buyer standpoint to get there? Here is my thought. There is 3 big key differentiators when you buy those cards. The first one is the type of video port you are looking at. So if you look at all the model, you have really like 2 options. You have the free DP plus 1 HDMI, or you have the 2 DP, so display port, plus 2 HDMI. That's for all the models. This is what you're gonna have to be looking at. Me, my personal preference will go with the first one, the free display port. For a simple reason is like the HDMI port, they are not the best on Linux because the support is not there. So if you are running on Linux, I would say like go through the 3GP one. If you are running on Windows, it's really like based on your preference and what you can find, to be fair. But my preference ultimate will be this one. Then the second key differentiator will be like the type of power connector you get on your card. And the power connectors, there is 3 types of in my research that I found. So the first one, let's call it A like that, is 2 by 8 pins. Okay, this is the first one. This is ready for the MSRP one, like the basic one. Then you have the second one, which is a 3 by 8 pins. So which one are going to be like MSRP plus like mine, which is having like a little OC out of the box. And then you have the 1 by like 12 pins connector a la NVIDIA. So this one is going to be like the NVIDIA type of port. If I have to choose again between one of those, I would go first with the 3 by 8 pin here. This one will be my number 1. My number 2 will be the 12 pin by NVIDIA, and you're gonna be like, what? Why are you choosing this one? And I'm gonna explain it to you too. And the last one will be the 2 by 8 pin. So why is this order? I'm gonna give you some like little math here, but the idea is like the wattage coming out from those pins is pretty like simple. So let's say you have one GPU. The GPU is connected from the PCI Express port, and the PCI Express port can push 75 watts in the card. That's the reference. And then you have the other option, which are like the 8 pin connector, which them are pushing 150 watts in the card. And the last one, like the last option, will be like the 1 by 12 pins, like the NVIDIA one, which could push up to 600 watts. So here is the little math. If you take 2 by 8 pin, in terms of wattage, you're gonna have the PCI Express plus 2 by 150. This is how much wattage you're gonna get from this situation here. So you're gonna get 375 watts. If you go with the 3 by 8 pins, you're gonna go 75 plus 3 by 150, which going to get you 425 watts. And if you go with the 1 by 12 pin, and again, you do the same calculation, it's gonna be the PCI Express port plus 1 port. So it's gonna be 675 watts. So this one, as you can see, is a little bit overkill. But here is the kicker. When I gave my recommendation here, I still believe like the 3 by 8 pin is gonna be the best, because you are in a position where you won't draw any power from the PCI Express there, and you still have like the safety of the 3 pin connector versus the 12 pin. I put the 12 pin connector behind because this one is definitively overkill. There is no way it's gonna burn with this card, because you're gonna be pulling like half or maybe like maximum like 2/3 of the 600 watt pin here. I don't see it burning. But you know, it is your call. In my opinion, to be extra safe, you just go with the 3 by 8 pin. The 1 by 12 pin should be fine too, no problem. And also, like, you might have like additional cost when you come to this one if you want your case to look good, to have a special cable, or yeah, this one might be a little bit pricey for nothing. And the last one will be the 2x8 pin. I believe like you will be able to get like the full potential of the card with a 2x8 pin without any problem, but you're gonna be pulling like wattage from the motherboard, and this, you know, I don't think it's gonna be a negative, but I'd rather like try to avoid it if you have the option. So here is my part when it comes to choice of connector and differentiation for the 9070. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room, which are like those models which are supposed to be better than the other one. And so when I'm talking about those big MSRP like plus model, I'm thinking about the ASRock Taichi here. I'm thinking about the tough one. I'm thinking about the Aorus Elite. You're gonna have to pay a premium for those cards here. All the ones which are like having on paper a higher frequency out of the box. And you're gonna be like, yeah, you know, this is what I want to pay for that. But the reality is that, as I mentioned earlier, those cards are gonna auto overclock themselves. And because they are running so low on energy, you don't really need them. So let me show you. If you look at my card, base clock should be like up to 30-70 megahertz. But as you could see, in reality, it auto-clock itself even higher than that. So what is the point overall? Well, there is none. What you are really paying for is the fancy cooler. This could be a good argument. You have the fancy fan and the fancy RGB. And again, this is all, you know, your decision. I'm not judging. I get it. Me showing you that with one of the best model here, I can't run above like 65 degrees Celsius, and I already have a higher frequency than the over like OC card. I'm like, what type of margin are you gonna really get out of this? So let's make some calculation real quick. The base model is around like 3200 megahertz here in terms of frequency. If you get the fancy one, you're gonna get at what? Let's say you go like totally insane and you are at 3400 megahertz all the time because the cooler is that crazy. So what is it gonna be ready? Well, after calculation, this represents a plus 6% increase. This is really what you're going to be paying for. And my guess is like you are not going to reach 3,400. I think the reality is going to be more around like 2%, max 3%. So 3% to max 3% on a scale at like 100 FPS. So if you start at 100 FPS, you're going to get 102 FPS. And to me, this is margin of error. This is where everything starts to be a little bit crazy. I'm not, you know, going to judge you to get one of those cards. I'm not, you know, like you do whatever you want with your money. But what I would say is that after understanding how this graphic card actually operates, there is no need to put the extra money towards it because it's gonna auto overclock itself no matter what. You're gonna always be like at the maximum potential of the card, like out of the box, okay, out of the box. And my guess is that if you really want to get like a big increase on performance, you're gonna have to undervolt it. And then we circle back to my take at the beginning of the video. My take at the beginning of the video was to tell you like this card kind of like act as a CPU. And right now, like the best way to overclock a CPU, I'm especially thinking about the AMD CPU, is actually to undervolt it. So undervolting will be definitively, at least in my opinion, like the best way to get the best out of those cards. Like the big cooler to me is a little bit, you know, overkill. If you want to get one because, you know, you want the best of the best and you want to get those free, like 2%, maybe 6% in theory, you know, just get it. In my opinion, not worth it. Well, that's it, that's all for this little like introspection into the 9070 XT. Guys, thank you very much for watching. And as always, See you in the next one. Bisous bisous.